I only read one book, but it's a good book, don't you know? I act the way I act because the good book tells me so. If I want to know how to be good, it's to the good book that I go. Because the good book is a book, and it is good, and it's a book.
And Jacob, who we did learn from just 2 chapters prior, and a further 3 chapters before that should be referred to as Israel, dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger. Even though Isaac, his father, was born there, did live all his life there, never once leaving to go anywhere else, and eventually did die there, as we did hear just 2 chapters ago, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report, for his brethren had been raping and pillaging small towns in the area, partaking in depraved and unnatural sexual acts with their livestock, smoking illicit substances, getting to know the local Canaanite girls, and they had been plotting terrorist atrocities that did involve making bombs out of chapati flour and hair dye. And lo, for doing this, his brethren did chase him with sticks into a small shepherd's hut, where within he did find a short man named Rooster, who did instruct him that he should leave by the window rather than the door, which he did. Now, Israel, which was Jacob's new name, when anyone could remember to call him by it, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and it must be admitted that this probably resulted in a lot of what would come to pass, and he made him a coat of many colours, and when he did wear it, he did look like he was wearing a big rainbow flag, and he did look truly fabulous, darling. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him, which wasn't entirely surprising, though the fact that Joseph did constantly grass them up to their father did no doubt have a lot to do with it too. And Joseph dreamed a dream. And while that dream could have been a dream about how one day he might live in a nation where a person would not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character, on this occasion it wasn't. And because the words tact and discretion weren't within his vocabulary, he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. And they did wince at the idea of him telling them about how he did dream that he did find himself naked in a crowded room, that he was being chased by cows, that he was indeed a person called Scott Robinson, and did have a wife called Charlene, and they did live on a quiet street in a place called Australia, where they did have an overwhelming feeling that their every move was being watched, or that one day a nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Yet, alas, it wasn't any of these dreams either, and he did say, For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And his brethren did chuckle amongst themselves at the mention of Joseph's sheaf being upright and erect, and upon looking upon his rainbow-striped coat, did remark that it was probably because he did see his brothers in the field without their shirts on, with their tanned skin covered in sweat that did glisten in the sunlight. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made observance to my sheaf, for nothing does catch the eye of the unwary with surprise quite like an erect sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams, and for his words, but more so secretly, because the Lord had seen fit to bless him with a larger sheaf than them. And he dreamed yet another dream, and not learning from previous experience the first time, he told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And though he could have dreamed many things, such as that one day on the red hills of Georgia the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood, he did not, for he did dream thus, Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made observance to me, For in Jacob's day the universe did only contain 11 stars, which does probably explain why it did only take the Lord a small part of the afternoon to make, back in the first chapter. And though centuries from now wise man who shall be known as astrophysicist will estimate that they are in fact 9 sextillion or 9,000 million stars, those who will take this narrative literally will claim that this verse will be evidence of a young earth, or that the Lord just hadn't got around to making the rest of them yet. And he told it to his father, and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I, and thy mother, and thy brethren, indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren did take hold of him, and did strap him into a device that would otherwise be known as a total perspective vortex, which was a fiendish device invented by a philosopher known as Trintagula, to annoy his wife, that did reconstruct the entire universe by examining a small piece of fairy cake, and did give the person strapped within it a true sense of their significance, or rather insignificance, within an ever-expanding and apparently infinite universe. However, in this case, the arrow that did say that thou art here did simply point unto Joseph, who did stand right at the centre of the universe, as all of existence did revolve slowly around him, though this may have had something to do with him climbing out of a shepherd's hut window into an alternate reality that had been created especially for him by the Lord earlier on in this narrative. And his brethren envied him, as thou mightest expect, but his father observes the saying, shortly before Joseph did eat the piece of fairy cake, saying unto those assembled, If I told thou how much I needed this, I wouldn't have time to eat it. And having proper jobs to do, as their sheep wouldn't tend to themselves, his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And hoping that he might be able to take the hint, Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send thee unto them. And with his very best glee face and jazz hands he said unto him, Here am I. And Israel did shake his head in despair. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again, for we do need to advance the story before it doth stagnate, and this shall surely be an adequate plot device. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, though we do not know for certain exactly what was certain about him, other than that he did have a certain look about him, of a man who, in stories such as this, will be encountered by the principal character, and will in turn reveal a crucial piece of information in a very detailed manner, that will allow the principal character to find the thing that they are looking for. And behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And having never before met this man, who is so insignificant that we do not even know his name, Joseph approached him and said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And having also never before seen Joseph, or knowing who Joseph's brethren are, the man said, They are departed hence. For I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan, up yonder cart track, for at least 3 miles until thou arrivest at a roundabout, wherefore thou art to take the third exit towards Flem. Yet take the second left after thou do enter the town, and followest up the road up the hill until thou dost reach the pasture. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, which is generally what afar off tends to mean, they conspired against him to slay him. For as with most characters found within this narrative, they didn't do things by halves, like sending him back home for a pot of stripy paint, a left-handed screwdriver, or a long stand. And they did huddle around unto each other, and with their backs arched and their heads tilted sideways in a dramatically sinister way, they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams, which, let's face it, is what tends to happen to folks who do inform on those doing wrong, but more so doth indicate a level of dysfunctionality within their family that does go even beyond the deeds of a woman who will one day be known as Karen Matthews, who will get her paedophile boyfriend's uncle to drug and kidnap her daughter so that she may be able to pick up a share of the reward money for finding her. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and realizing for a moment that his brethren were entirely serious and decided to be the voice of reason, said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him. But though this did sound harsh on Reuben's part, unbeknown to his brethren, he was in fact an undercover police officer who had infiltrated the group, and his plan was that he might rid him out of their hands, coming back later to rescue him, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colours, that was on him. And Joseph did think that it was surely a dream come true, and he did close his eyes, and assume the position. And they took him, and cast him into a pit, and though they did throw the Jew down the well, their country wasn't free. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it, though there was a considerable amount of cow slurry. So, rather than landing at the bottom of it with a loud splash, he did land with a wet, crumpled splat, and make a whimpering sound. And then, after a while, he did stop, and start shouting insults at them that did, in many cases, cast doubts upon the species of their various mothers. And after a while, despite the terrible smell, Joseph did find that being down in the pit did indeed keep him cool out of the heat of the day. And they sat down to eat bread in the hot midday sunshine. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, walking through their pasture in the middle of nowhere, not particularly on the way to anywhere, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother, and conceal his blood? Which in years to come would do nothing to dispel the stereotypes that would come to be used against their descendants. Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him. For he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content, for selling their stepbrother into slavery to a bunch of Arabs was obviously a much kinder and compassionate thing to do, and they didn't see anything wrong with it at all. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, who also just happened to be wandering through the pasture, not particularly on the way to anywhere for any good reason. And they did hear the shouts from the well, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt, which does go to show that if thou art in a hole in the shit, and thou art happy there, thou should keep us quiet about it, and that he who might liftest thou up out of the hole, out of the shit, is not necessarily doing it to be kind or for thine benefit. And though in many years to come some may say that the Midianites and the Ishmaelites were indeed the same people, and that it was in fact Joseph's brethren who did pull him out of the pit and sell him, if read literally, the Midianites were descended from Abraham's son Midian, and the Ishmaelites were descended from Abraham's son Ishmael, and Joseph's brethren were therefore cut out of the deal. And Reuben, who by this time had managed to sneak away from the others, returned unto the pit, and, behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes in a most dramatic fashion, and did turn his face to the sky, and did shout, No! And he returned unto his brethren, and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And his brethren did look at each other, and then unto Reuben, and did try and work out what he had just said. And when they did, they were suddenly overtaken by a great dread, for they did fear that, having seemingly escaped from his supposedly inescapable confinement at the bottom of yonder well, he might be lying in wait for them, biding his time until he could take his revenge, picking them off one by one in the darkness as they did become separated from the others once night did fall, butchering them with a meat hook that he had spent all afternoon slowly sharpening as he did wash them from the cover of the long grass while wearing his fisherman's raincoat. And before they did get the hell out of there, they took Joseph's coat, and killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. For anyone who doth know how a good slasher story does play out, doth know that thou doth need at least something dipped in blood. And they sent the coat of many colours, and they brought it to their father, which doth imply that they did both simultaneously give it to someone, and both took it themselves, and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no, as if there was more than one person who would be wandering around the desert in a jacket made out of gay pride flags. Handy knew it, and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces, which was one verse too many for a man who would, in centuries hence, come to read this narrative in a literal and humorous way, and he would take a deep breath and do his best to not make any jokes about a young man wearing a resplendent jacket covered in rainbow colours that would be rented and devoured by an evil beast. And Jacob rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days, wandering around the encampment, dressed in hemp, with the word Sam Super Spuds written across his behind. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he did refuse to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son's mourning. Thus his father wept for him, and there was a scene of great anguish that did involve a great deal of wailing, and all of his sons did glance upon one another with a guilty look, and with sorrowful music the scene did fade to black. And the setting did change, as did the music, which did become more foreboding, as late at night an ox cart with blacked-out curtains did come to a stop within a lonely back street, and blindfolded and tied, Joseph was pulled out from the back of it, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and captain of the guard, and once again the scene did fade to black, in a way that did demand the words to be continued to linger alone in the air. And the Lord was indeed pleased with the direction that the narrative had now taken, and he did depart in a way that can only be achieved by someone who is always everywhere, all at the same time. And he did arrive at a tent pitched at the edge of an encampment in the middle of the desert, miles from anywhere, and he did slip inside, where an old man with a long grey beard did sit studying a long list of items, attempting to condense them down to something more manageable and memorable. And the man did look up from his task, as the Lord did help himself to a plate of chicken drumsticks and several bottles of lager from the fridge, passing one unto the man, and he did inquire unto the Lord if the new storyline was unto his liking. And the Lord did think for a while, and then did answer that it did need more stars in verse 9. And the man did look puzzled, and did say unto the Lord, But my Lord, there art but only 11 stars. Surely if thee had wanted there to be more stars, thou wouldst have made more stars in the first place. And the Lord did think about this, and then did remark that there is a lot more to making stars than wearing trousers with a high waistline, and being a judge on a talent show, and that he was pushed for time and only had the afternoon to get the job finished, and so he might have just cut a few corners in the hope that nobody would notice, and the man did look at him in an expectant way. And the Lord did once again think for a while, then did turn unto the man, and did say, I know, it's missing some good old-fashioned rape, incest, and sexual depravity.